Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be a ferocious monster. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found while visiting an island that is inhabited by other ferocious monsters and their child boy king. So that's a fun thing. Anyways, today it is Short Story Tuesday, a fun day out of the week where I talk about all the short form literature that I read that is just like, wow, this is unusual, I have to talk about it. And sometimes I'll read like Poe or a classic author or something new, a short story collection maybe. And sometimes I'll focus on, as is the case today, I'll focus on children's novels too. In the past I've talked about Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Jumanji, and today I want to talk about a book about ferocious monsters and little boys who are troublemakers. I am talking about Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. So I don't have a physical copy, it's on my Kindle, but I think the cover is very interesting, so I'll put it somewhere, around here. It's a very interesting cover, and it was illustrated by Maurice Sendak. In addition to writing a number of children's books, he also illustrated countless books, not only his own, but the books of other people, and he won awards for his art, and he's a prolific and well-known author because of it, and illustrator. So that's pretty impressive on his end. And one of the things that he wrote is Where the Wild Things Are, which is a book about a little boy who travels to an island filled with monsters and becomes their king for a short while. So Maurice Sendak, very good author, died a couple of years ago. I think it's 2012, so it was about 8 years ago. And I like his art. I don't know. I really like the art in Where the Wild Things Are, and I don't know if that's indicative of his style as a whole because I haven't seen his other work. But I would be interested in finding those other children's novels just to see if this is representative of it, or if this is an exception and a pretty cool exception. Always worth finding out there. So throughout this video, I'll put a bunch of illustrations of the artwork in the book because I think it's important to view that and appreciate it as well. So without further ado, let's talk about Where the Wild Things Are, a little summary, a little analysis, and we'll move on from there. So Where the Wild Things Are focuses on a little boy named Max who is walking around in a monster costume and is generally annoying his mother with his obnoxious behavior. It gets to be where she sends him to his room without dinner at night, and he sort of wishes himself away from his home. Although it's suggested that this is happening in his head, you could also imagine that he actually does run away and finds a small boat and sails to an island in some far-off land filled with who knows what. So he ends up doing that, and on the island he discovers these ferocious monster creatures that are very well designed, very interesting. I often find myself just thinking about them at times whenever I think of monsters in general, because it's a simple way to draw a monster, but it's very compelling because it's monsters, that's what you imagine. They're very different from what humans look like. So the monsters are all aggressive and are like, we're gonna eat you, Max. But then Max stands up and is very bravado and alpha male about that, although the alpha male idea is a myth. He's basically like, I am your king, I am the king of the wild things, and the monsters bow down to him because he is very confident, and confidence is key in life. And they have a good time just horseplaying around. Eventually Max, he's not a monster, and he begins to feel lonely and wants to go home. And I think there's also a little little bit of maybe excess there, where like there's too much of what of horseplay and whatnot, and he comes to realize, maybe their moderation is a key there. So he ends up going home, or he wakes up in bed, and he finds that his mother has placed his dinner in his room. So that's where the story ends. It's a very nice and warm way to end a story. In terms of analysis, there's just a little bit. This is a children's novel. We don't need to go too deep and to like question the inner workings of this story. The first thing that I noticed is the imagination at play here. I touched on this before, especially with children's novels, children's short stories, how important it is to get for the children's authors to get children to use their imagination and consider worlds that are quite different from our own, for any number of reasons. And they do that well in Jumanji, with the idea of the monkeys just horsing around in this house and giant storms coming. And then I believe that what are their shorts? Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. The authors do it pretty well there too, with imagining what it would be like for food falling from the sky. And Maurice Sendak does that well here. First with like the idea of going to a mysterious island at first, where he takes a sailboat, and that's wonderfully like imagined there. And then the idea of the monsters, like how I've never seen before or since monsters designed that way, unless people are trying to parody where the wild things are. I think it's really well designed monsters, very imaginative, and like the idea of being a king among these monsters, or royalty at all among these monsters, is enough to get young kids to think and imagine worlds like that. So I think Maurice Sendak does a wonderful job there, and it's definitely worth passing down to your child, or even just like picking up the book just to look at the images, just to get a feel for that. Another thing I noticed, which I touched upon in the summary, was the theme of excess. Part of the reason, besides the loneliness, that Max wants to go home, is because everything there is too much of what he's already had. So when he was at home, like he was roughing around and engaging in horseplay and being a loud, obnoxious little brat at times, and he can indulge in that, which is very. I wonder what Freud would say about that. He can indulge in that in the place where the wild things are, by being a rough and tough and tumblesome little monster, and being their king and ordering them to march around and all kinds of stuff. And that's a great time at first, but eventually it proves to be too much for him. Like you can't. It's Maurice Sendak is trying to say you can't be doing this all the time. You eventually have to settle down. You have to be quiet. You have to relax. Not every moment of your life as a child needs to be filled with loud noises and whatnot. I think that's a fun message to send to children. Like, he's not patronizing kids in any way. He's just telling them a story, and he's subtly putting that theme in there, which I think works. It's a very, very interesting theme, and I wonder if Maurice Sendak does that in any way in his other books. I would certainly love to again check those books out. And again, the last thing I want to note is the images, which are great, and you've seen them throughout this video. Very wonderful images, beautifully illustrated. Maurice Sendak is like a very talented artist, a very talented writer. Certainly worthy of respect and admiration, like years after this book was written, because this was written in the 70s, and I still see people like reading it to their children today, which is impressive, because books don't often hold up like that, especially books that are written in the past. But this book is kind of timeless in that way. Overall, I would say, I enjoyed reading this. It'd be fun to revisit it if you're an older adult. If you're a child, why are you watching this video? But also, this is good to introduce to your child. It might get them reading, or it might get them thinking about the world, or like using their imaginations, which is always fun. Something of note is that they did make a movie out of this, which hilariously had James Gandolfini as one of the monsters, the voice of one of the monsters, and it sounds like exactly what you would think. It's pretty funny in that regard. It was directed by Spike Jonze, and there's some additions there, like Max is written to be lonely and like. And not enough attention is paid to him and his family, so he runs away. But the monsters are also kind of lonely and sad, and so there's that sympathy and the empathy going both ways there. And I really enjoyed the movie, and I recommend that if you haven't seen it, you go out and watch it. I'm sure you could find it on a streaming service for cheap. I only say that because I feel like it's been unfairly forgotten over the years. Like, it came out and then people didn't really talk about it after that. And I wouldn't say it's fair of that. Like, it's a great movie. Maybe not 100% Oscar worthy or something like that, but it's decent, and I felt a variety of emotions when I watched it like a while back, and I'd certainly like to revisit it to see if it holds up. So I do think it's worth exploring, and also we're talking about the book, because the movie version could have just been a cash grab, and I don't think it is. Anyways, if you have something to say about Where the Wild Things Are, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you, and we can talk about Maurice Sendak and various monster creatures. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people may find out about the joys of Maurice Sendak and various imaginative books. Until then, I wish you the best of luck and your weird and wild travels. Farewell.